Jared, it's been a while. This is the pastor.
And this is the pastor's older brother.
And this is the pastor with no answers. And, hey, I'm going to let everybody in on a little secret. Like the last handful of episodes, me and Jared actually recorded a whole month ago because I had to stock up on sabbatical. I wasn't doing 2 podcasts. I already had to do Bad Christian a little bit. But this way, didn't have to do 2.
Wait, so you stock up on the Bad Christian ones too?
We did not.
Oh, you did not. Okay.
No, too much to do ahead of time, and then also we had like that Perry Noble interview, and it was a little bit questionable whether or not I was going to be able to be a part of that Perry Noble one because I was in Roan Mountain, Eastern Tennessee, and you actually had to drive like 10 minutes away from my cottage to even get a signal. So I was like, man, do they have a signal anywhere in this town? So
wow.
I actually figured it out in a parking lot, I think at Chick-fil-A. So,
hey, when's the Chris Simpson interview? I'm just curious.
It is in June,
okay.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, he seems really chill on email. I know these sorts of questions bother people, but I don't know. It's just my world lenses. This is just how I see the world, and I think I've matured a good bit from a standpoint of what this lends itself to. But I am always curious about people that I think are really cool that could be a Christian. I'm always curious about it.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
It's just a curiosity.
So you're saying this direct reference to Chris Simpson, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I mean, if you read his lyrics, though, for the first album, either he is a Christian or he had some major Christian influences in his life because the lyrics are pretty hardcore.
Well, he asked me if I knew of he named someone and said me and him were in like a Christian hardcore band back in youth group or something like that. And I don't know why he thought that I knew him, but I was like, no, I don't know who that was. So I mean, there's definitely a cultural, a Christian foundation of some sort there.
Yeah.
What's crazy is I remember when we both started listening to Mineral, someone read a Chris Simpson interview, and that was in the days where at least me and my circle of friends, including Matt and Toby and all those guys, I remember if we heard someone cuss a lot, we just assumed they weren't Christians. And so I think in an interview, we may have written him off as a Christian because he said a bad word or something, which is really funny, thinking that was only 20 years ago where we operated from that.
Right.
So we probably read an interview and like, yeah, he's not a Christian. But anyway, pretty interesting. But yeah, I'm super excited about that one.
It's one thing. Sure. One thing's weird is the fact that he's the second artist that I love who's made mention of this band called The Swoon.
Yeah, and I didn't like it, dude.
See, I liked it. I mean, I haven't listened to it a lot, but I don't know how you and I missed it. Like that was our circle of music, and how do we miss that band when 2 of the people we love and respect love that band? Like I just don't know.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
All right, so here's I came up with. I should have told you to do this beforehand, but here's some bands that I'm listening to, and then the last one is the one that you have to check out, and then you can tell me one I have to check out. I think Weezer maybe is the one that I have to check out.
There's 2.
Okay, so these are the newest. I know some of these are a little dated, but the newest Wonder Years, the newest Car Seat Headrest, the newest Grimes. And then this one actually is pretty new. It's an R&B guy who's done stuff with Kanye and Kendrick, but his name's BJ Chicago Kid. I saw him open up for Big Crit, and he won't be your cup of tea, Jared, but for folks that kind of like that R&B sound, he is really, really, really good. And here's the
like Frank Ocean type stuff, like similar to Frank Ocean, or like
not similar to that, but definitely as respectable.
Gotcha.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like it's something to where you would respect it, but it just wouldn't be your cup of tea. So I saw some sort of a top 25 hip hop albums of 2015, and I read through them, and this one caught my eye. You've got to check out Tut. T-U-T.
Okay.
He is badass, dude.
So
he is just so raw and so badass.
So
it's the kind of rap you listen to and you're just like, if I was about to beat somebody up and I wanted to beat someone up in a laid back way, I'd play this while I'm doing it.
All right, so are we thinking like Ice Cube or more like Killer Mike or like
I guess out of
school,
those
new school?
I like that kind of question. That was easy. Out of Killer Mike and Ice Cube, I'd say Killer Mike.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I'll definitely check it out.
Yeah. Kanye West and Kendrick, I'd say Kendrick.
Okay.
Snoop Dogg and Tupac. You want me to keep going?
Nah, I've got the picture. I got to say, too, I wasn't a real big fan of the new Kanye West. I mean, I haven't heard it. Yeah, I got to a point to where I'm just kind of sick of his ego. I'm sick of his lyrics.
Yeah.
And I don't know. But I will say this. If you're a rap fan out there, you've got to check out the new Aesop Rock.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. I mean, this guy is probably, in my opinion, one of the best lyricists in the entire rap game right now. I mean, his lyrical genius is unbelievable. And he also did all of the music for it, too. So he produced it, and he's the sole rap vocalist. But it's definitely his best work since Labor Days, which is his classic album from like 2001.
Yeah.
Also, definitely check out Weezer's White Album. Their last 2 albums have been incredible, so they're finally back on track. But the White Album is really good. And then one you and I like together is the new Chairlift album.
Sweet. Yep.
It's kind of cool because Chairlift is like, it reminds me of St. Vincent going full-on pop.
Yeah.
Like it's got that experimental vibe to it, but it's also got full-on pop songs as well. So definitely recommend that one as well.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, I want to give some shout-outs to Josh Kindig, Emily Marriott, Mike Anderson, Andre Polar, Jesse Peelman, and Stephen Mayer. We really thank you guys for supporting this podcast. And also Marcus Thronberg and Aaron Hoff. You guys are former supporters, and we certainly appreciate that as well. I'll just put it like this. We're in a day and age where it is really awesome that Jared and I can use technology. And it honestly, well, I would say with this podcast, it's not as narcissistic because we're actually leaning, me and you are leaning more on our guests to bring the content. But podcasting, it actually is pretty narcissistic to be like, people want to hear us talk, so let's come up with some neat conversations and let them hear it.
Right.
So this podcast, we're not narcissists because we bring in the guests. No, but we're kind of in a day and age where it's super cool that Jared, you and I can make a product with our friends and people that we invite on, and then get it out to, one of our episodes is close to 10,000 downloads.
Yes.
So 10,000 people have listened to this kind of stuff, and we're doing it because we want to, and we get a kick out of the fact that these conversations are important to us, so why wouldn't we think that they're kind of important to others? And I'm telling you, we definitely get some emails of people that are just saying, man, just the fact that you're having these conversations. So that's the one side of the coin. The second half of the coin is, it is actually pretty cool to be able to support something that is actually being given away for free. Now, this is not any sort of guilting or something, because my brother and I would obviously love for you to listen, period. But I'm just telling you, as someone who has supported something that he believes in and likes, it definitely does give you some sort of an ownership and makes you feel good inside. So go to pastorwithnoanswers.com if you want to look at the different ways you can give. I would recommend saying, you know what? I listen to this episode regularly. I'm going to pay $1 an episode. And we've got like a little $5 a month deal. But I have no problem with putting that out there because I have no problem with you not paying anything. Jared, does that make you uncomfortable?
It does not make me uncomfortable, because if you don't want to give us money, you don't have to. And if you don't want to listen, you don't have to. But we love we love those who listen, and we love those who give as well. So
that's right. And hey, if you're pissed off that I just said that, push the stop button. This is our podcast, damn it. Get off our podcast if you don't like it. Right, Jared?
That's so true. Word.
Can you put a little more umph into that?
Word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
All right, well, we're going to be talking about alcohol today. I'm going to tell you this, Jared. If you want a lot of traffic on Facebook, say something about homosexuality or say something about alcohol, and the Christians go crazy every time, dude. If you want to see just craziness on Facebook, say something about alcohol or say something about homosexuality, the church goes wild. All right. Well, we are here with our guests, Leighton Flowers and Ryan Amick. Ryan's more of a familiar voice for you guys. He's kind of the redneck who is just kind of has an open door policy for all sins, but still claims Jesus.
My life verse is everything is permissible, but I just don't go any further than that.
Me being a personal friend of Ryan, I can assure you that he has a heart for the Lord, and I'm just messing with him. And then Leighton Flowers, you're the smart guy on this call. Well, no, I can never say you're the smart guy on the call when Jared is here. You guys are the smart ones. Then I turn to my right, and Ryan's a really smart guy.
Buddy.
I need to just say I'm the dumb guy on this call. Hey, tell us real quick how to find your podcast and anything else you want to promote. Go for it.
Yeah, my podcast is Soteriology 101. And you can find the blog at soteriology101.com, and it's information on the doctrine of salvation, specifically with regard to Calvinism and traditionalism, and kind of I take the opposite of Calvinism, and I used to be a Calvinist for about a decade, a part of a Reformed Baptist church, but came out of Calvinism, and I kind of explain that and the reasons biblically why I'm no longer a Calvinist.
Sweet. So it's you say soteriology?
Soteriology.
Soteriology?
Soteriology, yeah.
You took the words right out of my mouth.
Just a big word for the doctrine of salvation.
If you're trying to intimidate me, it's working.
All right, well, let's jump into this alcohol issue. We haven't done yes and no for a while. These won't be intimidating yes or no's to where you really want to explain, maybe one or two of them, but let's just keep the same order. We'll start with Ryan, then myself, then Leighton, then Jared. So Ryan, myself, Leighton, then Jared. First, yes or no question. Is consuming alcohol always a sin, Ryan?
No, I don't think so.
Just a no, please.
No.
All right, I'll say no. And Leighton.
No.
Is consuming alcohol always a sin?
No.
No. Jared?
No.
Is it usually a sin, Ryan?
No.
I say no also. Leighton?
No.
Jared?
No.
All right.
This sounds like it's going to be an awesome debate, by the way.
Is getting drunk at a party with your responsible, mature Christian buddies a sin, Ryan?
No.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
That's a tough one for me. I'm gonna where I'm at right now.
Yes or no?
I'm gonna say yes. Leighton?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes, with qualifications.
Well,
So
hey,
yes,
I wanted
yes,
qualifications
yes.
too, man.
Okay,
I
yes,
wanted those.
Yes.
Should we abstain from alcohol in public, given the potential negative message that it could send, Ryan?
No.
I'm going to go with no. Leighton?
Yes, for me, yes.
All right. Jared?
No.
All right. And Ryan, is getting tipsy a sin?
Hell no.
I'm going to say no. Leighton?
I would probably say no, too.
All right. Jared?
No.
All right. So you guys kind of have a snapshot on the picture that we have here with our guests. And what I want to do right now is check out some scriptures. And gosh, I'm kicking myself right now because, sweet. I had to center it a little bit. All right, so here's some interesting verses. 1 Habakkuk 2:15. I said 1 I meant first. There's not a 1 and 2 Habakkuk.
Donald
if
Trump.
You've listened for any period of time, you realize most of Joey's scriptural references come out of Habakkuk.
Woe to him who gives drink to his neighbors, pouring it from the wineskin till they are drunk, so that he can gaze on their naked bodies. So I read this and I was like, I don't know if this is anti-alcohol as much as it's anti-pervert. Zechariah 10:7, the Ephraimites will become like warriors, and their hearts will be glad as with wine. Their children will see it and be joyful. Their hearts will rejoice in the Lord. I get to do commentary on these. Notice it doesn't say, and their hearts will be glad as with wine. right before they go to hell. Isaiah 5:22, woe to those who are heroes at drinking wine and champions at mixing drinks, Ryan. Isaiah 25:6, on this mountain the Lord Almighty will prepare a feast of rich food for all peoples, a banquet of aged wine, the best of meats and the finest of wines. This Isaiah sounds drunk there. He says a banquet of aged wine, the best of meats, and oh yeah, the finest of wine. Isaiah 28:7, and these also stagger from wine and reel from beer. Priests and prophets stagger from beer and are befuddled with wine. They reel from beer. They stagger when seeing visions. They stumble when rendering decisions. And then lastly, Psalms 104, he makes grass grow for the cattle and plants for people to cultivate, bringing forth food from the earth, wine that gladdens human hearts, oil to make their faces shine, and bread that sustains their hearts. All right, so let's get super serious here. Get this thing going. Ryan, do you want to go to heaven if there are no PBRs there?
Oh, I'd be fine with that because they'll have Coors Light at the back.
All right, so let's look at the classic story. And I will say that I do look at this story, and most people would interpret my interpretations as pretty liberal. But Jesus' first miracle, most of us agree that it is changing the water into wine at a wedding celebration where all the wine had ran out.
Keep the party going.
Did Jesus, or was Jesus concerned about other people getting drunk? Does this story shed any light on the topic at hand? So I just threw some questions out here. You guys say whatever the heck you want to right now.
I mean, weren't weddings back then like 3-day ordeals where basically people ate and drank and went buck wild for many days?
Think so.
Yeah. I mean, I think he was being pretty hospitable there. You could argue that maybe he caused somebody to stumble at that party because clearly I don't think I've ever been to a wedding serving alcohol where somebody didn't get wasted.
Right. All right, so let's camp out on Ryan real quick. So you obviously have no problem with you don't think drinking alcohol is a sin. None of us here do.
I don't think it's inherently
but
a
I
sin.
think what separates you from what I think separates you from us is that you're convinced that getting drunk on like an isolated basis is not a sin.
Convinced is a strong word, but I don't see God getting worked up over every now and again you have too much to drink, or even intentionally have too much to drink and just completely cut loose, in the same way that on Thanksgiving we all give ourselves a pass on gluttony.
Yeah.
Because it's a time to celebrate and you're just going to cut loose and the normal rules of wise behavior don't necessarily apply.
Yeah.
So I think as long as it's every now and again, I don't see a problem with it.
So there is a custom in the Old Testament of feasting. There were times of feasting. Why didn't they say, and time to kick back the wine?
I think that was assumed when you feasted, you drank a bunch of wine.
Interesting.
Could it be more to do with the actions that follow drunkenness? So in 100%. Other words, so you're drunk, but if you are with, like Joey said in the beginning, responsible friends, you're not doing crazy things, maybe that's the difference. Sure. I don't know. And I think some people can probably handle their alcohol better than others.
Yeah.
Agreed,
maybe.
Wholeheartedly.
Well, I do have to say in the last couple of years, I do lean a little more towards what Ryan is saying. And it really is interesting when you look at God's word. It's just, you can make just as strong of a case for drunkenness to be seen as a lifestyle of being a drunkard. In fact, those references make more sense if you think of it that way when you take into consideration something like Psalms saying, hey, he makes wine that gladdens the human heart. I think that's probably not just someone saying, this wine tastes so good. I'm so happy about this wine. I think maybe the wine took effect to some degree and made someone a little buzzed, and they're happy. Leighton, what do you think about all this? I mean, is this, like, for someone that's a little more conservative on this issue, I mean, is some of this kind of offensive? Like, dude, come on, you're taking some stuff out of context.
No, yeah, and even in the yes and no questions, I was probably the most conservative with my answers. And so let me just start by, qualifying even some of those answers by saying that there's a difference between when you say, is something a sin, sometimes you're asking something about legalism. And of course, I do believe Romans 8:1, there's now therefore no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus, that he has paid for sin. I think 1 Corinthians 6:12 was mentioned earlier. All things are lawful for me, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful for me, but I will not be dominated by anything. And so when Paul first talked about that all things are permissible, even when he talks about that, he goes on to the anticipation of someone might even jump in and say, well, that means we can go on sinning that grace may abound. I mean, we can go do just do anything. And he says, by no means. And so I think the natural man and the sinful side of us, we hear the truth of grace, which that's what grace is, that all things are permissible. In other words, God covers, his grace covers all things. We hear that as a natural man, we think, oh, good, I'm free to sin and get away with it. Whereas I think the broken man, the person who's kind of come to the end of his sin, hears the truth of grace and thinks, oh, good, I'm free from sin, now I can get away from it. And so there's a distinction in my mind with this discussion with regard to, for the believer, it's not so much about what is permitted or what isn't, or what's sinful and what's not, but what is wise and what isn't. And not, instead of saying how close to the line of what is called unholy can I get, to more of, I want to get away from that line because I know how stupid I am. And if I get away from that line that I know I could cross because I become inebriated and make stupid decisions, I want to, in wisdom, choose to do things that I know are going to lead me down a wise path where I'm not less likely to make mistakes. And so it's more of a question for me about what's wise and what's beneficial for the Christian in his walk, not so much about what's legalistically right and wrong.
Do you think someone, I get all of what you're saying, do you think someone sounds crazy to say, yeah, when drunkenness is mentioned as a sin, it just seems, back then, drunkenness, when you say drunkenness, you're talking about a drunkard. In fact, sometimes it even says the drunkards. Do you think that sounds crazy for them to say, yeah, so isolated drunkenness? Because I'm with you. I mean, it's grace first, and we need to be led by the Holy Spirit. But let's talk technicality. Is it crazy for someone to say, yeah, if you get hammered one night and it's not a sin?
Well, I mean, again,
or do you understand the conversation?
No, I definitely understand where you're coming from. Like even Proverbs, but even if you're just saying don't be a drunkard, there's enough passages of Scripture that also speak, I think, specifically of not becoming intoxicated. Proverbs 20 verse 1 says, "Wine is a mocker, strong drink is a brawler, and whoever is intoxicated by wine is not wise." And so it's a matter of wisdom. It's not wise to become intoxicated. And so it's not a matter of whether in my mind at least, whether it's right or wrong so much as if it's wise or unwise as a believer.
Gotcha. All right. Let's go to the witnessing deal. Well, does anybody have any response to anything that's been said so far?
I mean, I think he's right on the money as far as being wise about it.
His name's Leighton.
I'm sorry, Leighton. I think you're right on the money about being wise about it. I think that you're hitting on probably a bigger issue of whereas we as Christians, our human side does want to constantly draw the lines in the sand of what we can and can't do, that it shouldn't necessarily be about that. But at the same time, I feel like Jesus came, and certainly Paul's writings seem to support this idea that the legalism of old, which many Christians still wave around like a big stick, really doesn't have any place in the current conversation.
Well, and I think you're right. I think Paul even speaks to that. I mean, it's a little bit different context in his world. Obviously, customary, the context is a little bit different, but Romans 14 speaks to that. Let me read a little section of that because I think it really answers this question. Paul says, therefore, let us not pass judgment on one another any longer. Amen to that. I think we could all say that because there's a lot of that happening. Don't pass judgment on each other any longer, but rather decide never to put a stumbling block or hindrance in the way of a brother. I know I'm persuaded in the Lord that nothing is unclean in itself, but it is unclean for anyone who thinks it's unclean. For if your brother is grieved by what you eat, you are no longer walking in love. By what you eat, do not destroy the one for whom Christ died. So do not let what you regard as good be spoken of as evil. Do not, for the sake of food, destroy the work of God. Everything is indeed clean, but it is wrong for anyone to make another stumble by what he eats. It is good not to eat meat or drink wine or do anything that causes your brother to stumble.
I would actually agree with you 100% there, Leighton, as far as that sensitivity that comes along with the trappings of community, the fact that we end up having to do this life together.
Right.
There is the potential for our decisions to affect somebody else's reality in a negative way. But how do you square that? Because Joey was about to get into the whole witness argument. How do you square that with the idea that Jesus now you could make the argument that this is not about his brothers necessarily, but when he's arguing with the Sadducees and the Pharisees, he seems to thumb his nose at notions of other people, judging what he's doing in legalistic terms. You've got, I've got one verse here from Matthew 11 that says, "For John came neither eating nor drinking, and they say he's a demon. The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they say, look at him, a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of the tax collectors and sinners. Yet wisdom is justified by her deeds." And so there's a certain amount that I have to be careful not to turn into a rebellious notion, but there's a certain amount of me that wants to be a little bit more like Jesus and say, listen, let's get past this conversation. The folks that are uncomfortable by me drinking,
right, and
that bugs me. I don't know why, but it bugs me.
Yeah, and that doesn't do away with Paul's teachings, and here's how I bring those two together. So yes, I would say that with the passage that Ryan just read, we have to, I think, and Leighton, obviously you'll have something to say for sure that will be helpful to this conversation, but I think that it's safe to say that Jesus at some degree was like, I can't control what these people think. I'm with who I'm with. These are the prostitutes and the tax collectors and the people that typically party, and I'm drinking and I'm eating, and these people think I'm a drunkard and a glutton. I can't worry about that. Like, I can't manage my reputation. So what is Paul talking about? Here's what I think Paul's talking about with causing people to stumble. I think what that would mean is if Jared, the alcoholic uncle, comes over for Christmas, and Jared, you're not an alcoholic, but if he comes over for Christmas and we all know that Uncle Jared is an alcoholic and he struggles, there's not going to be a bunch of drinks around during the Christmas holidays because that's knowledge that I have about my older brother, and I because I love him, I'm going to set my freedom aside for the sake of my biological and Christian brother. But I don't think that Paul is necessarily giving us a responsibility to be on reputation control no matter where we're at.
But what would you...
Because that's unwinnable. I mean, you can never, ever have a pure reputation because everyone has some kind of thing that bothers them.
Yeah.
So that's an impossible scenario anyway.
Yeah.
But what do you say to the guy that, if Joey's at a bar with me or at a restaurant with me and he's having a beer, what do you say to the guy that goes to church and maybe is on the fence as far as whether he's convicted by, to not drink, and he sees you drinking? A lot of people would make the argument that you just drinking in public could become a stumbling block to people. Because you pass a Joey.
I don't think that's here's what I think. with this alcohol issue, the fact that we treat it in such a weird way, I think escalates the problem. Like, I think that teens, they want to go out and drink and party it up because we make it out to be like this bad thing that we're not supposed to do. And, alcohol, that's where I think cultures like France, they drink wine like iced tea, and the kids just grow up with it. And you don't have, as many of those problems.
Well, and I think with my 4 children, and of course they know that Laura and I partake on occasions. As a minister, I choose not to do that publicly because of some of the the reputation issues and people having a different conscience than I would have even about casual drink and those kinds of things. But and people have a different belief on that. I'm not real strict with them with regard to if those who choose to abstain. I think if they're doing so in faith, then they're doing what's right by their own conscience, and that's something they should do. But when I speak to my kids about this, and I think it's exactly what you're saying. If it's a forbidden thing and it's never talked about, and we just kind of hide it, kind of like a lot of guys do and parents do with sex, things like that, then it becomes this taboo little thing in the closet that nobody takes care of, and therefore that becomes the very Achilles heel for that child in the future, because it's treated as this thing that's taboo, and we just don't talk about it, and it creates problems for the kid later, which is very typical within church kids, where they all of a sudden, you've always heard about the preacher kid who goes off to college, and then they're the preacher kids are the worst because sometimes they become the most rebellious because they're finally given the freedom to do it. And so one of the things that I think is really the responsible thing to do as a parent or a pastor or a minister is to speak about these things and to realize that, like sex, and even I compare it with fire, alcohol can be considered a gift of God. When used properly, it has positive benefits. And just like sex outside of marriage, it's just like fire that comes outside of your fireplace. If the log falls out of the fireplace, then all of a sudden that thing that used to be great and look pretty and warm our house now could burn us to the ground and kill us. And so it can destroy your life if it's taken out of its right boundaries and context. And so I think it's really wise for us as parents to be able to help our children to see that there are gifts of God that, when used in moderation and used in wisdom, going back to that word wisdom, are actually gifts of God and are really beautiful. Sex is beautiful. Even alcohol can be a great gift of God through medicine or through just the enjoyment of it. And so when we throw it into the closet and we pretend like it's just evil, 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 and we never talk of it, and then we expect our kids to grow up in a healthy environment, healthy way, dealing with things like sex or alcohol, that obviously becomes, I think, very dangerous for them.
Yeah, so you see, you compared alcohol and sex as kind of like a fire. Would you say that you treat alcohol differently because of that, and because of how common alcoholism is? And I ask this because I think Jared made a good point as far as there's no way that Leighton Flowers or Ryan Amick or Joey Svensson or any of us can make everybody happy. I'll give you an example. So Leighton doesn't drink in public, but there's some people that would be pissed off seeing you come out of a PG movie. They'd be like, you have no business watching a PG movie. You should stick to G, or you shouldn't even subject yourself to entertainment. Or, let's say Leighton goes out and buys, it's a 3-year-old car, but it is nice, boy, and it's shiny, and it's a sports car, and let's say your dad gave you the money for it, but people are just like, whoa, what's up? The love of money. You know what I'm saying?
I actually had that happen. My brother gave me an old Lexus. It was like 12 years old and was worth about $5,000, but it was a Lexus, So, and I was a pastor at a small church, and they're like, where do you get all the money to get a Lexus?
Case in point. That's perfect. Yeah, perfect example.
So would you say that you view alcohol a little bit differently?
Well, and the reason is even just like gluttony was mentioned, because sometimes gluttony and the drinking of wine, strong drink, are kind of going hand in hand. Well, there's a distinction between the two. One, because you very rarely hear somebody pigging out on Wendy's and then going out and killing somebody in a car. You see what I'm saying? There's obviously effects that can come from being inebriated and being unwise as a result of becoming inebriated and making really bad decisions. And so you have a situation where, again, it goes back to wisdom, godly wisdom, and you're asking yourself the question, okay, if I pig out once in a while for Thanksgiving, that's one thing. I mean, I'm not going to likely go kill somebody or do something really stupid or beat somebody or become an alcoholic from or become addicted in this sense from occasionally partaking in extra, food. Whereas with alcohol, there is an effect that comes with it that could affect others in a negative way. And so, again, it goes back to godly wisdom and judging those things with all things considered.
Yeah, I would agree with the fact that it can affect you and maybe kill someone. That's why, if you drink a bunch of wine after Thanksgiving, stay home. But I guess I have, and I've used the same rationales that you're saying, and so I respect the heck out of them. But I have a problem with, because I've heard people say, well, I mean, no one's going to become a food addict like they could become addicted to alcohol. And my thing is just look at the stats of how, America as a culture, people are saying that obesity is such a major issue with our children. We have no idea what the conditions of adult hearts are going to be in 30 years from now. Like it's an epidemic. So I would say maybe food's even a worse issue. Like for someone to make a habit of pigging out, compare that. I'll put it this way: if you have someone that pigs out once a day, I would say most Christians would be like, it's not that big of a deal. But if that same Christian that pigs out 5 times a week or 7 times a week goes out and drinks too much one time in the whole month, you have people that would freak out. So
sure.
I don't know with the food thing. People are dying.
Proverbs 23:20 covers both of those things. Do not be heavy drinkers of wine or gluttonous eaters of meat. So you got both of them covered there. And so I hear what you're saying. In our culture, definitely today, there's almost a sense in which we've dropped our consciousness with regard to our appetites and with regard to how we eat. And I've actually been convicted by that. It's one of the reasons I'm in the process of not only losing weight, but eating more healthy diet because of that very fact. But again, I don't put that onto somebody else, just like the Romans 14 passage I just read. I don't put that on somebody else as a judgment to say this is something that you're not as righteous as I am because you're not as thin as I am, or because you're not as eating as healthy as I am. And I might do the same thing with regard to alcohol to some extent. But I just think it's really hard to compare the two side by side, specifically because of the effects of alcohol in so many families and one of the leading causes of death, in the United States is alcohol related, and so it's just really hard to compare the two when you're talking about wisdom and making wise choices.
Yeah, I agree too. I think that with alcohol consumption, the dangers are so short term. Like you can wreck your car, you can beat somebody, you can make a stupid decision, fall off a building. And also the repercussions are more, it's less about you and more about people around you. If you're eating yourself to death, that's pretty much just you. But if you're beating someone or wrecking your car, your actions have immediate consequences on other people. So I do think it's a little different.
But to defend the other side of what Joey was saying, you could make the argument, and I think probably rightly so, in order to raise the conscious level of the listeners to on the eating level, is to say when you overeat, think about how that affects your kids and your grandkids when you have a heart attack at 55, or whenever they're having to push you around in a wheelchair because you can't even carry your fat rear end around. You know what I'm saying? It does affect other people too. It like you said, though, it's not an immediate consequence oftentimes. And whenever everybody's having to pay your health bills and all the problems that are coming on because you're not taking care of your body, it does have a longer term effect on people around you. That's one of the reasons I was convicted on it, is because I began to realize this isn't just affecting me when I choose not to eat a healthy diet. It affects my spouse, and it affects my children, it affects my work even, because I'm not healthy in my work and I can't give my full effort to what I'm doing, and so it's just not wise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What do you guys think about people that they say that drinking any alcohol is a sin, and they justify their belief by saying that it wasn't fermented. I think another.
Well, how do you get drunk with unfermented wine?
Right. Okay. There you go. All right. So moving on. Now there's other people that would say, hey, that wedding that Jesus was at, the wine was not near as high as a percentage as wine is nowadays. So it is quite possible that they could have drank all the wine that was available and not have been drunk. Do we all think that's stupid, or is there some cultural relevance there? I don't know my history well enough.
Yeah, I'm not up on my Jewish wines either. I don't know.
Well, I think the point mentioned earlier that there's so many passages of Scripture about not being drunk with wine kind of debunks the whole concept that the wine of that time didn't make you drunk.
Right.
It obviously did. That's why there's so many warnings within the Scriptures. I've got 16 of them pulled up in front of me. So there's definitely a warning that should be heeded. And so I think that it's really important that we don't allow passages like that necessarily to taint the real issue at hand, which I really do think has to do with Christian liberty and wisdom. I don't have a problem at all with Christians who feel that they should abstain from alcohol, right, and that they should encourage abstaining of others just for wisdom's sake. Where I start having more of the problem is I think the same problem that Paul and possibly even Jesus mentioned earlier had with the Pharisaical judgmental ways of people, kind of putting others down and even treating others as if they are not Christian or as if they are not believers if they have a different level of conscience on some of those issues. I just think there's so much in the text of Scriptures that address that kind of legalism that more than any other sin, Jesus seemed to rebuke the sin of legalism and Pharisaism more than any other. Mm-hmm. And so that's to me, when I see that within a person, that to me is a spiritual problem. And I have a lot more concern for somebody who still sees legally through the legalese eyes of the Pharisees of here's how I earn my righteousness, or if I can abstain from all cuss words, and if I can abstain from sex until marriage, and if I can not abstain from any kind of strong alcohol, if I can do all those things, then God's going to accept me. And there are a lot of people who live in that kind of worldview and really do believe they are attaining righteousness through their moral living, and that's a much more dangerous thing than someone who occasionally enjoys a glass of wine, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Damn it! I thought we were going to debate here.
Ryan almost gave an amen, right? Hey, let me ask you this, Ryan, because I'm really curious about this. So let's use our founding pastor as an example. For people that have been going to Seacoast for 5 years or more, the most familiar face around here at this point still is Greg Surratt. His son is the lead pastor now. But imagine going to like this big fundraiser downtown that you got invited to because everybody wants to invite the dude that sells garbage trucks to the big parties.
I'm a hot commodity on the social circuit.
So, and you see Pastor Greg there, and you walk up to him and say, "Hey, Pastor Greg, I know you don't know me, but man, I really appreciate your teachings." He's just like, "Oh, hey."
That's exactly how it would probably go too.
No, like how would you feel if, he was easily just drunk?
Oh, honestly, I'd be a little disappointed.
Yeah, why?
Yeah, because in that kind of setting, I don't think that's a responsible way to be. You know what I mean?
Explain yourself.
So if you're in a public setting with a lot of strangers, I think most of us would agree that getting drunk is probably not a wise move. Chances are you're going to say something that you regret. Chances are that you're going to invite I don't even know if I agree with that. I was going to say you're going to invite judgment on yourself. You're basically, to me, it's about distracting people from what's really important. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
And you've lost control of yourself, essentially.
Totally.
In the public eye, you've lost total control.
But maybe that'd be a good thing at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Because I shouldn't be worshiping Greg Surratt. I should be worshiping Jesus.
Here's what I'll say to that is I agree wholeheartedly, but I would say what would be worse than that is for him to do it by himself. Best case scenario, if he's going to drink too much, is that he's doing it with people
with strangers?
that know him and love him, but not a huge because the party atmosphere. There are strangers. There are people that.
Oh, that's what you meant.
Right. There's strangers.
Okay.
There's people that just know him as the guy that teaches and all that stuff. I'm just saying that I would rather someone do it out in public and hurt their witness than to do it by themselves where there's no accountability and they're never going to get any help.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm saying.
Wait, why are you drinking though?
Huh?
So the implication is that he needs help because he's drinking?
No.
We're talking
in public.
Getting drunk, like
right. I'm saying so. So you need help if you're drunk in public or drunk by yourself, or is that what you're saying?
I'm just saying. If someone has a problem with alcohol, I would rather them do it in public. Okay. That way, there could actually be people that say, "Man, I love this guy. It's not like I think his whole heart is messed up, but he needs help."
So the implication.
So in other words, I agree with what Ryan said as far as he probably shouldn't do that because of his influence. My automatic knee-jerk reaction is, "Oh, so you want him to do that by himself?"
I would say yes to that. That's where I disagree with you.
Really?
Yeah, because I think that if you're in your house and you're not in danger of hurting anybody or anything, that's better than being drunk in a public spectacle. But making an ass of yourself.
Better for the church, but we're talking about better for Greg.
Yeah,
I love that we're talking about Greg's drinking problem on this podcast. I hope somebody accidentally fast forward to this part.
That's funny. No, so I guess what I'm saying is, as someone that loves Pastor Greg, if he continues to have a drinking problem behind closed doors, how in the hell is he going to get help?
But I thought you just meant
you're like a one-time deal.
Well, so the implication is that getting drunk is wrong. That's what you're saying.
I don't know where I'm at. I would say I'm closer to Ryan's opinion as far as drunkenness is probably a lifestyle. But I am definitely way off the not off the charts. I definitely feel that we have a responsibility in how not like I do not feel like I need to abstain just in general. But I would say that if I'm in public with a bunch of people that I don't know, I definitely want to make sure I'm not close to crossing a line. That's just where I'm at.
You're going to make them uncomfortable. It's just the exact same conversations we've had with cuss words and coarse jokes and that kind of thing in the past. It's like if it's going to offend somebody else, you need to be. It's a lack of respect. It turns into a lack of respect.
Right.
So I wouldn't get wasted.
Which is why I see it's less problematic if you are confined to your house. If you're going to get drunk.
All right, so hey, all the alcoholics, listen to me. Do not ask for help. You just stay in your room.
Oh my gosh, twist my words.
You just stay in that room and you kick back those beers.
Okay, that's alcoholism. That's bad regardless of context. So whatever.
All right. Do y'all mind if I change directions for just a second?
If I like the direction and if Leighton likes it.
You can edit this out. So this is actually coming from real world. I was involved in.
Oh, so all of our stuff was fake?
Yeah. I was involved in a little outreach group that went basically to an underserved community, quote unquote, and basically tried to spread the gospel, show Jesus' love, et cetera, et cetera. Through the course of that, there were a number of times that we would hang out with guys who their natural routine was to get together on Saturday afternoon and Sunday afternoon and pass around a fifth of whatever somebody picked up and just hang out and have a good time and probably get wasted. And there were times that I seriously considered grabbing a six-pack and going out there and drinking with them to create a sort of community, to create a place, a jumping-off point where we could relate to one another. and to try to bring down those walls of, I'm sure, the assumptions that they had about me because I came bearing the name of Christ.
I've tried to use sex in that same way. Go ahead.
Right. And so my question is I was kind of being, in a loose way, mentored by another lady in that neighborhood at that time who also saw herself as ministering in that neighborhood. And she strongly advised me, do not do that. She was basically saying, like, under no circumstances could that be blessed by God.
Yeah.
In my heart of hearts, I kind of disagree. I kind of think there could have been some fruit that came from that. I would be curious to hear y'all's thoughts on that.
Yeah.
Well, I think my first thought is, are these guys like routinely abusing alcohol to where they're addicts?
Yes.
That's my
addicts,
first question.
I don't know, but they're routinely
well,
abusing
alcoholic.
I don't know. Yeah, that's a strong word because that, to me, that's a medical condition. These are guys that regularly had behavioral issues. I mean, they regularly probably drank too much. Whether they were alcoholic might be is a different thing.
Yeah, okay, so if they're having behavioral problems, this probably can be directly attributed to their alcoholic consumption. So I would say that is a totally bad idea.
Yeah, but what if they're already stuck in that habit? What if Ryan developed a long-term relationship and every time he was around them while they were drinking, he was drinking, but he obviously never crossed a line that they were crossing? Could that not ever be, oh, this is crazy. He's enjoying beer, but
that's a little bit
but he's not doing it how we're doing.
That's what I'm saying is that it actually could bring up the conversation that it's not about the alcohol. It's about the abuse.
I thought you were insinuating that you would get wasted with him.
I mean, that sounds like a lot of fun, but
that's what I thought you meant.
No. But I just meant just as a door, because honestly, there were several times that we walked up and they were drinking together, and 2 or 3 guys would just scatter like quail because they didn't want to offend me or they didn't want to be judged by me, et cetera, et cetera. If I had walked up with a 6-pack of beer, they probably would have stayed, and we probably could have had some productive dialogue.
That sounds reasonable then, based on that.
But I would like to hear some pushback against that because, this lady that I respect a ton who had the exact same heart, if not way more, for that neighborhood than we had, she felt very strongly against that there was no fruit that could come with that. That we needed to be above reproach, quote unquote.
Yeah, I guess it goes back to the level of control that alcohol has in their lives. If it's controlling their lives such that they're neglecting or abusing their family, then you casually sipping a beer is probably sending the wrong message.
Well, I would say it's probably besides the point, but the angle that she's talking from, I would probably disagree because she probably sees beer as almost like a tool of Satan, and she's just like, whoa. I mean, I bet you she thought about that a lot that night, thinking, what's wrong with Ryan? Like, that's just nuts. And she probably even went so far as to say, what's wrong with Seacoast? You know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
Yeah. So I think I would disagree with her from the angle that she is thinking. But if it was on the basis of her really understanding that culture and knowing those guys and just saying that's practically key. Like this just isn't a good idea, then I would. I
think that's where she was probably.
And I think it's important too to kind of keep in mind why some people have that strong of opinion when it comes to alcohol. Some of them come from alcoholic families. Some of them maybe have been from churches that taught a real strict view of alcohol consumption. So they just really believe that that's what the Bible teaches, and that's just that almost like the King James Version onlyist. That they believe the King James Version only Bible, and that's just what they've been taught. So they feel that way. Doesn't make it necessarily right. It just means that when I'm talking to somebody who's at that level of conscience. And then I understand where they're coming from. Sometimes it's just best not to engage in a real in-depth kind of debate or trying to one up or I think that's what the Romans 14 was trying to get with Paul is when you're talking to the quote unquote weaker brother that you need to be more concerned with the relationship than with being right to win the relationship versus winning the argument. And that's just more of an attitude issue from us. This lesson was taught to me by a pastor when I was just a kid. I remember this. My pastor was walking out to his car. Now, this may seem silly, but this really happened. He was walking out to his car, and he spit on right before he got in his car, he spit. And this little preschooler saw him spit. And, of course, the little preschooler has been taught it's wrong to spit. You're not supposed to spit. And so he sees the pastor spit, and it was almost like y'all were talking about. It's almost like for that preschooler, that was like seeing your past.
Heresy.
Yeah, it was like he's drunk or something. It's horrible. So this kid was really bothered by it. Well, the mother mentioned it to the pastor, just not being mean, but just saying, "How little Joey, saw you spit the other day, and he was upset." And that pastor said, "I would like to talk to your son." And she said, "Really? No, you don't need to worry about that. It's no big deal. We understand. We'll explain it to him." And she goes, "No." He goes, "No, I really want to talk to him." And so he went and talked to that little boy. I don't remember his name. I just call him little Joey for your sake. But he went and talked to that little boy and said, "Joey, I'm sorry I did that. That was wrong. That was very insensitive. I should not have done that. Will you forgive me?" And it was just, and I remember hearing that story. My dad was a youth pastor, and he told me the story of what happened. And it just made my level of respect for him go up, because it would be easy and right for the pastor to go, "Well, get over it, kid. Come on. I mean, I just spat. Big deal." But he had the attitude of, instead, I'll take the high road here, and I will teach, this young man a lesson of being able to humble yourself and not approach the relationship in pride, but to say, I want to show, in a sense of love towards somebody who's, quote unquote, the weaker brother and doesn't understand maybe some things, but I really want to teach them what it looks like to be humble, and it looks like to approach the person in the right attitude. And so just things like that, I think, again, it all goes back to what is wise here. And I think that goes back to the scenarios y'all were just painting with, if you've got somebody who has absolutely no problem drinking alcohol a little bit. In other words, they're not susceptible at all to alcoholism. That's not been a problem within their family. And they're really good with reaching people who are regular drinkers and those kinds of things. And that's something that person feels in their conscience is what God's calling them to do and has put them in that situation. That may be very different for someone else, though. And so there's some of those things where it just comes down to, again, Christian liberty and wisdom of asking yourself, is this a wise decision? Could this lead to bad behavior? Could this lead to addiction? Could this lead to other problems? And then being able to, like you said before, even have accountability with other brothers in your decisions and how you're using any of the gifts that God gives us, whether it be food or drink.
Yeah. All right. Well, I legitimately want to know your take on the gospel application that Ryan said that I agree with too. I'll pose the question in a way like it sounds like I'm trying to back you in a corner, but I'm really not. So did Jesus not use good judgment when he was drinking and eating with obvious sinners and painting a picture of looking like a sinner?
Well, yeah, obviously, yeah. The obvious answer is, of course, Jesus always uses good judgment. So,
right.
That's the obvious answer. But could it be that Jared or Joey or Matt or John or Jim could do the exact same thing Jesus did, absent, turning water into wine, obviously, because they couldn't do that.
Right.
But could they have done the exact same actions and actually be unwise in that? Probably so. Because if somebody who comes from an alcoholic family or is an alcoholic themselves or prone to alcoholism was doing the exact same thing that Jesus did, that actually could be an unwise choice for that individual. And that's why we love, as Christians, we love black and white. We love, it's either right or it's wrong. It's either sin or it's not. But when you understand the true Christian faith, it's a lot messier than that. There's a lot more gray areas in that. And I think that's where we engage in real life and real questions, and that's what makes Christianity alive and abundant and fun versus the legalism of the Pharisaical world, where it's just everything is wrong over on this side, and we're going to judge you and look down our nose at you, even though probably secretly we're actually doing the exact same things we're judging you for, and or even worse things in secret, and the kind of world that we create, that we even see around us in our Christianity, quote unquote, that people are just judging others even though they're doing a lot worse when everyone else is not looking. Right.
Yeah, but I guess wouldn't y'all think though that most people that are big on making sure you have a good witness for people, if it wasn't Jesus, and let's say it was someone in 2016, and people actually let's say Ryan. If Ryan was in any situation and people from the church came to me and said, I saw Ryan hanging out with partiers and he had beer in his hand, like, wouldn't most people say, that wasn't wise of Ryan because look at the havoc that it's causing? So I guess what I'm saying is if somebody looks at the fruit of what Jesus did, most people that get, super excited about maintaining our witness would say, looking at that and that alone, wow, that somebody messed up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that we probably need to do a separate episode on witness, because I think I'm serious as Christian. I can't speak for other sects, but as Christian evangelicals, we have completely bastardized that word into meaning.
You're ruining your witness right now.
I know.
Right now, you're ruining it.
We've made that word to mean living above reproach and living a perfect, perfect life from an outside viewer's perspective. And that drives me nuts, because what is a witness about that? Like, what perfect people did God use in the Bible to do His will? And so, I don't know. Like, if the point of Christianity is to keep from offending others, then I just don't see the point in it.
We've already blown that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Christianity's already totally blown
that. That's what I'm saying. So yes, I think if our intent is to be very careful about what we're doing in public, so that we're not causing a brother to stumble, I'm all about that. If our point is ever to keep from catching flack from any judgmental Christians, that.
Right.
That. Like, to me, those people scream of Pharisees.
Yeah.
And that's part of what's so attractive about Jesus to me.
Yeah.
Is the fact that He had no time for that kind of BS.
Right.
He was all about the truth.
Right.
Sorry for my language. Leighton,
I'm going to bleep that out, so don't worry about
it.
I'm
sorry. I just love the fact that he said the F word twice, but then said BS. So
that was kind of odd.
Sorry.
Let me ask this. So there's one extreme of being overly concerned as far as, everywhere we go, we're looking in public and, is someone seeing me in the bar? And then you have, another extreme of like how I interpreted Paul's teachings as far as if I know a personal brother, hey, you struggle with alcohol, not going to have it in my house. What do y'all think about, because I've done this before, and I actually recognize some hypocrisy here. I have been at small group, and I've said, hey, when it's people that I haven't gotten to know, I'll ask, hey, does anybody struggle with alcohol?
I've done that before.
I've done that, but I have never once, as I've been taking the cheesecake. Okay. No, as I've taken the cheesecake out, I have never once said, does anybody have a problem with overeating? Because this is some daggum good cheesecake. There's some hypocrisy there. But what do y'all think about making like a little alcohol? Like, is it a big enough deal? Because here's why. I have friends who have beaten alcoholism that I would not dare in that sort of a closer setting. I would not take beer out unless they told me, hey, I'm totally fine with that. That's in my past. I don't struggle with it. So what if there's someone that has just finished with beating alcohol and then all of a sudden there's a bunch of beer whipping out? They could be like, gosh, I wish they would have at least asked. But maybe alcoholics don't think that way. I don't know. Never been an alcoholic.
I'm sure they think that way. I think that's always, that would always be the safe bet, is if you're not sure of where everybody's at, to ask. Now, my fear is that I would ask, and somebody that was not finishing up with a struggle of alcohol, but that was just beginning a struggle with alcohol, would not speak up. And I've had that happen at my small group, where I offered folks alcohol, or my Bible study, where I offered folks a beer, and then gave the disclaimer and was worried that maybe somebody didn't speak up that should have spoke up. So
well, that is on them. That is all.
Well, I knocked the dust off my sandals.
Jared, last question goes to you first. Should we ask? No, I'm sorry. Let me scroll down here. Is it a
sin to steal?
Is it a sin to steal beer from the alcoholic that is killing himself with the booze? So he's killing himself, drinking too much, and you decide to steal it from him.
Okay, so this is a reference that only you will get, Joey. What would Charles Ingalls do? Anyway, if you're a Little House on the Prairie fan, you got that reference. I don't know.
Charles would punch the guy for abandoning his kid and say, look at what you do have. There's a lot of things that you're missing, but you've got to look on the bright side of things. And in the meantime, there's a broken heart right over there of a precious child that you're not even paying attention to. And
say it. I'm an alcoholic. Yeah. Say it. No, so I think going back to that example, he would take the bottles and smash them. So I don't have a problem. I wouldn't call it stealing.
I know.
But I would destroy.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, if it was somebody I cared about and I saw him destroying his family and his own life, as a friend at the very
Jared,
least,
what if it was
what
if it was a really expensive, enticing
craft
beer, man? And you're like, hey.
I would take it.
All right, thanks for listening to Pastor with No Answers. I know some of you guys listened while you were getting wasted, while others were reverently taking communion with grape juice while we were talking about alcohol. Either way, we thank you for listening. And hey, I want to ask you a favor. Go to iTunes, leave a rating, a review. Definitely is a good thing for us. So do that. Go to pastorwithnoanswers.com. Hope you have a good one.